People rarely say it directly, but you can feel it in small moments. Someone talks over you and doesn't even notice. Your message sits unanswered while they reply quickly to others. Your opinion is ignored until someone else repeats it. Invitations stop coming, where you're treated like an option instead of a priority. None of this happens loudly. It happens quietly, through everyday behavior. And after a while, you start to sense something uncomfortable. The way people treat you is reflecting how they perceive your value. Stoic philosophy teaches that respect begins with how you carry yourself, not with how loudly you demand it. If you want more insights like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Number 1. People treat your time as flexible and less important. When others treat your time as something they can shift around at the last minute, it shows up in the way plans get changed without much thought for your schedule, or the way meetings get pushed back while they stay locked in place. You rearrange your day to fit their convenience, and the pattern repeats so often that it starts to feel normal. This is not about one-off mistakes, but a steady signal that your commitments register as less fixed than those of the people around you. In modern routines filled with overlapping demands, it creates a quiet imbalance where your hours become the adjustable part of every equation. Stoicism directs us to observe this without bitterness because the external world operates on its own priorities. Yet we retain full command over how we allocate our own effort and attention. By holding your time as non-negotiable in your own practice, you begin to shift the dynamic from within rather than waiting for others to change. The deeper issue lies in the subtle way this sign erodes your sense of self-respect when left unexamined. Each time you absorb the delay or the cancellation without a firm boundary, you reinforce an internal story that your structure matters less. Stoic thought, rooted in the clear line between what belongs to us and what belongs to others, reminds us that their perception of our availability is outside our control, but our decision to protect our hours is entirely ours. Practically, this means tracking your own calendar with the same seriousness you would give to a core duty, declining last-minute swaps with calm clarity instead of eager accommodation. Over weeks and months, this consistent stance rebuilds the quiet authority that others gradually come to respect because it is rooted in disciplined self-regard rather than reaction. True value in Stoic terms never depends on how quickly someone replies or how rigidly they guard your slot in their day. The sign simply highlights where external validation has crept into your judgment of worth. When you stop measuring your day by the respect it receives and start measuring it by the virtue you apply to every hour, the frustration loses its grip. You act from a place of inner order, choosing responses that serve your long-term character instead of short-term harmony. This shift does not guarantee instant reciprocity, but it guarantees that your peace remains untouched by the comings and goings of other people's calendars. Practicing indifference to their flexibility while remaining strict with your own creates a natural filter in relationships. Those who value substance begin to align their actions with yours because they sense the steadiness behind your choices. Stoicism shows us that real influence flows from the person who has mastered their own time first, not from the one who bends most easily. Each protected boundary becomes a silent declaration that your life is governed by principle, not by the convenience of others. In the end, this sign serves as a daily teacher rather than a source of resentment. It trains you to separate your worth from the pace at which people respond to you. By returning again and again to the Stoic discipline of controlling only your own conduct, you cultivate a presence that carries weight precisely because it does not depend on their approval. The pattern of flexible time fades in importance as your internal standard rises. Living this way turns the observation of low-value signals into fuel for higher self-command. You move through the same interactions with the same people, yet the quiet authority you carry changes how those interactions land. Stoicism offers no shortcuts here, only the steady work of aligning every hour with virtue, and that alignment is what ultimately commands respect without ever demanding it. Number 2, your opinions are dismissed. In group conversations or team meetings, your contributions land with minimal acknowledgement, while others' ideas spark follow-up questions and nods of agreement. The discussion flows around your input as if it were background noise, and over time you notice that people rarely turn to you first when a decision needs weighing. This sign appears in the everyday rhythm of talk, where your perspective registers as optional rather than essential. Modern life packs these moments into meetings, family dinners, and casual catch-ups, making the dismissal feel ordinary rather than personal. Stoicism invites us to see it plainly as information about how others currently weigh our words, not as proof of their lesser merit. The pattern points to a place where we may have allowed our voice to become tentative or overly accommodating in the past. When we soften our thoughts to keep peace or avoid friction, others learn to treat them as lightweight. Epictetus taught that our faculty of reason is our true domain, and using it with clarity and courage is the only measure that matters. By examining each discussion afterward, we can spot where we held back not out of wisdom, but out of habit, then commit to stating our view once with steady conviction and letting the outcome rest. This internal correction builds the habit of speaking from principle rather than from a need to be heard. Dismissing this sign as mere rudeness misses its deeper teaching. It reveals how external consensus can quietly pull us away from our own judgment if we let it. Stoic practice calls us to value our reasoned opinion at its full weight regardless of the room's reaction, because the room's reaction belongs to others. Each time we deliver a thought cleanly and then release attachment to its reception, we strengthen the muscle of self-trust that no group can grant or revoke. The calm repetition of this practice turns the dismissal into a training ground instead of a wound. Over repeated interactions, the shift becomes visible to those paying attention. People who once passed over your words begin to pause because your consistency signals that you are not speaking for effect but from a settled inner standard. This is not manipulation or performance. It is the natural consequence of living according to reason and virtue. The sign that once signaled low value becomes the very arena where higher value is forged through disciplined speech and unshakable composure. Stoicism does not promise that every opinion will suddenly land with applause. It promises that your peace will remain intact because your worth was never placed in their agreement to begin with. By refusing to chase validation through louder volume or more frequent interjections, you preserve the quiet power that comes from knowing your mind is your own. The discussions continue, but your place in them changes because you have changed the source from which you speak. This outline ultimately reminds us that true authority in conversation is earned through character, not through the number of times we are quoted. Each dismissed idea becomes an opportunity to refine our thinking and deliver it with greater precision next time. In doing so, we align ourselves with the Stoic ideal of the person who contributes fully without needing the contribution to be received fully, and that alignment is what commands lasting respect in any circle. Number 3. Others only contact you when they need a favor. The pattern emerges when your phone lights up with requests for help, advice, or resources. Yet weeks can pass without a single message that simply checks in or shares something neutral. The contact is transactional, arriving when their need arises and fading once it is met. In daily life, this shows up as being the reliable one who is remembered only in crisis or for errands, while mutual friendship or professional exchange stays one-sided. It is a quiet indicator that your role in their network is defined by utility rather than genuine regard. Stoicism views this as external behavior we cannot command, yet it offers a clear mirror for how we have positioned ourselves in relationships. The deeper Stoic response begins with honest reflection on whether we have trained others to see us primarily as a source of support rather than as a full person. When we say yes too readily or offer help before it is even asked, we create the expectation that our availability is constant and cost-free. By applying the dichotomy of control, we stop resenting the one-sidedness and instead examine our own past willingness to overgive without reciprocity. The correction is simple in principle and steady in practice. Respond to genuine needs with measured generosity while protecting the boundary that prevents exploitation. This sign does not diminish your inherent worth. It merely highlights where external relationships have been allowed to define your role. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that other people's actions are their own business, and our business is to meet them with justice and kindness without sacrificing our own integrity. When we enforce that boundary calmly, we reclaim the space to be valued for who we are, not only for what we can do. The favor seekers either adjust or drift away, and both outcomes serve the same purpose of clearing room for more balanced connections. Practically, each incoming request becomes an opportunity to practice deliberate choice instead of automatic yes. A brief, courteous reply that acknowledges the need while stating your current capacity teaches others that your time and energy are finite and respected. Over months, this consistent stance reshapes the dynamic without confrontation. The transactional contacts decrease, and those who remain begin to engage on more equal terms because they sense the quiet self-possession behind your responses. Stoicism teaches that real friendship and professional respect rest on mutual virtue, not mutual utility. By refusing to let the pattern of favor-seeking dictate your emotional state, you align yourself with that higher standard. The frustration that once accompanied each request dissolves into clear-eyed action, and your presence in the lives of others gains depth precisely because it is no longer taken for granted. In the long view, this sign becomes a valuable teacher of self-mastery. It trains you to give from abundance rather than obligation, and that abundance flows from the inner reserve of character that Stoicism cultivates daily. Others may continue to reach out only when they need something, yet your inner ledger remains balanced because you have stopped keeping score and started living according to principle alone. Number 4, you are not invited to meaningful gatherings or decisions. Notices of important meetings, family events, or professional opportunities arrive late or not at all, while others seem to receive them as a matter of course. The exclusion is rarely announced. It simply happens through the natural flow of information that bypasses you. In everyday life, this appears as discovering after the fact that a key discussion took place without you, or that a social circle made plans that omitted your name. It signals that others do not automatically include you when matters of substance arise. Stoicism frames this as data about current social positioning, not as a verdict on your character, and therefore something we observe without personal injury. The pattern often stems from earlier moments when we downplayed our own relevance or failed to demonstrate consistent engagement in shared spaces. When we remain quietly in the background or hesitate to claim our seat at the table, others learn to proceed without us. The Stoic correction lies in showing up fully in every arena we enter, contributing with clarity and reliability so that our absence becomes noticeable rather than convenient. This is not about forcing invitations, but about cultivating the kind of presence that makes exclusion feel incomplete. Exclusion carries no power over the person who has placed their worth beyond the guest list. Epictetus compared life to a banquet where we accept what is offered and pass what is not, always keeping our inner freedom intact. By focusing on the excellence of our own preparation and conduct, we remove the sting from every unsent invitation and turn the energy towards self-improvement that no gatekeeper can block. The gatherings continue without us, yet our inner circle of virtue grows stronger. Each missed invitation then becomes a prompt to refine our own standards of participation. We prepare more thoroughly, listen more attentively, and speak with greater purpose in the spaces we do enter. Over time, this disciplined approach changes how others perceive our role because they begin to associate us with steady competence rather than optional presence. The shift is gradual and never guaranteed, yet it rests entirely within our control. Stoicism assures us that true belonging arises from character, not from a number of times our name appears on a list. By refusing to tie our peace to inclusion, we free ourselves to engage life on terms that honor our reason and integrity. The decisions and gatherings that once highlighted our absence lose their emotional weight, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of living according to our own measure. This sign ultimately serves as a call to elevate our own circle of influence through consistent excellence. We stop waiting for the invitation and start becoming the kind of person whose involvement adds unmistakable value wherever they appear. In that elevation, the pattern of exclusion fades in relevance, and a deeper form of respect takes its place. Number 5. Boundaries you set are repeatedly crossed without apology. You state a limit clearly, yet the same request or behavior returns soon after, as if the boundary had never been spoken. Conversations circle back to the same pressure point, and the lack of acknowledgement leaves you repeating yourself without result. In daily interactions, this appears in personal relationships, work demands, or social expectations that keep testing the same line. The repeated crossing signals that your stated limits carry little weight in the minds of others. Stoicism sees this as an external test of our resolve, not a reflection of our right to have limits in the first place. The deeper work begins with the way we enforce those boundaries after they are stated. If we soften them under pressure or fail to follow through with calm consequence, we teach others that our word is flexible. Stoic discipline requires that we uphold the boundary with the same steadiness we use in every other area of conduct, neither angry nor apologetic, simply consistent. This practice protects our energy and trains us to value our own structure above temporary harmony. Repeated boundary violations lose their power when we stop measuring our worth by whether others respect the line. Our worth is already fixed in our character. The violation is simply information about their level of regard. By maintaining the boundary without emotional investment in their compliance, we align ourselves with the Stoic principle of focusing on our own actions alone. The pressure may continue, yet our inner calm does not. Each instance of crossing becomes a moment to reaffirm our standard rather than to argue or plead. A brief, factual restatement paired with a clear outcome delivered once and then released turns the exchange into training for self-mastery. Over repeated encounters, the pattern either adjusts or reveals who truly respects the relationship, and both results serve our long-term clarity. Stoicism teaches that peace is preserved not by controlling others' behavior, but by controlling our own response to it. When we hold the boundary with quiet firmness, we demonstrate the kind of self-command that naturally commands respect over time. The crossings may still occur, but they no longer disturb the foundation we have built within ourselves. In the end, this final sign completes the picture of perceived low value and points us back to the only remedy Stoicism ever offers: unwavering commitment to our own virtue. By protecting our boundaries as an act of self-respect rather than a demand for respect, we close the circle. The external signs remain useful data, yet our inner value stands independent, solid, and untouched by how others choose to behave. This is the freedom and the power that the philosophy has always promised, available to anyone willing to practice it daily. Number 6. People interrupt you frequently and speak over you. In conversations, your sentences are regularly cut short, while others finish their thoughts uninterrupted. The flow of dialogue shifts away from you midpoint, and no one circles back to let you complete your idea. This happens in meetings, at dinner tables, and even during casual talks, creating a steady sense that your voice is treated as optional rather than essential. Modern life moves fast, yet the pattern is consistent enough to notice. Stoicism teaches us to observe this behavior without taking it as a personal attack, recognizing it as information about how others currently weigh our contributions. The deeper issue often lies in how we have allowed ourselves to yield space too easily in the past. When we pause or hesitate the moment someone else begins speaking, we train people to treat our words as less urgent. Drawing from Stoic principles, we reclaim our space by speaking with calm steadiness and finishing our thought without rushing or raising our voice. We do not fight for the floor through volume, but through the quiet authority that comes from refusing to abandon our own reason mid-sentence. This sign reveals where external validation has influenced how much air we take up. Marcus Aurelius advised focusing on our own duty rather than the reactions of others. Each interruption becomes a prompt to reinforce our internal standard. Deliver the point clearly once, then release attachment to whether it receives full attention. Over time, this consistent practice changes the dynamic because people sense the unshakable composure behind our words. Practically, we stop apologizing for continuing or shrinking back when cut off. A simple, composed return to our point, as I was saying, delivered without frustration, teaches others that our input is not easily dismissed. The interruptions may still occur, but they lose their power to unsettle us because our worth is no longer tied to being heard immediately. Stoicism reminds us that true respect is earned through character, not through winning every conversational battle. By maintaining our calm and completing our thoughts with dignity, we embody the kind of presence that gradually commands space without demanding it. The pattern of being spoken over becomes training ground for inner strength rather than a source of quiet resentment. Living this way turns every interrupted moment into an opportunity to practice the Stoic virtue of patience and self-command. Others may continue to speak over us at times, yet our inner authority grows stronger with each calm continuation. In the end, the interruptions matter less than the steady character we build in response, and that character is what ultimately shifts how people engage with us. Number 7, your achievements or good news receive minimal reaction. You share a meaningful accomplishment or positive update, and the responses are brief, generic, or quickly redirected back to someone else's story. There is no genuine curiosity or follow-up questions, just polite acknowledgement before the conversation moves on. This pattern appears in texts, group chats, and face-to-face moments, signaling that your successes do not register as significant in the eyes of others. In today's fast-paced world filled with constant updates, the muted reaction stands out as a quiet indicator of perceived value. Stoicism urges us to view this without bitterness, seeing it as external feedback rather than a judgment on the achievement itself. The root often lies in how we have previously downplayed our own efforts or sought validation through sharing. When we present our wins with hesitation or immediately minimize them, others learn to treat them lightly. Stoic practice calls us to share from a place of quiet confidence when appropriate, then detach completely from the expected enthusiasm. Our satisfaction must come from the virtue in the work, not from the applause that follows. This sign teaches us to separate our self-worth from external celebration. Epictetus emphasized that we control our judgments, not the judgments of others. By finding fulfillment in the disciplined effort behind the achievement rather than in its reception, we protect our peace and strengthen our internal standard of success. The muted reactions lose their sting because our validation is now internal. Practically, we continue to pursue excellence for its own sake and share selectively with those who have earned the right to hear it. When responses remain minimal, we simply note the information and return our focus to the next right action. This steady detachment prevents the cycle of disappointment and builds a reputation for substance over show. Stoicism assures us that genuine respect grows from consistent character, not from dramatic reactions to our news. As we stop needing their excitement to confirm our progress, we embody the calm self-assurance that naturally draws deeper regard over time. The pattern of flat responses becomes less relevant as our inner satisfaction deepens. In the long run, this outline shows that true value is measured by the standards we set for ourselves, not by how loudly others cheer. Each understated reaction becomes another lesson in self-reliance, reinforcing the Stoic path of living according to reason and virtue, regardless of audience size or enthusiasm. Number 8, you are assigned the least desirable tasks or roles. At work or in group settings, the routine or unglamorous responsibilities consistently land on your plate, while others receive higher visibility or more interesting assignments. The allocation feels automatic, as if your name is the default for anything tedious or behind the scenes. This happens repeatedly in team projects, family duties, or volunteer efforts, creating a clear pattern that your role is seen as secondary. Modern environments with tight deadlines often mask this as practicality, yet the consistency reveals the underlying perception. Stoicism views this as neutral data about current positioning, not as a final verdict on our capabilities. The pattern frequently stems from our own past willingness to accept without question or to volunteer for the lesser tasks to keep peace. By always saying yes to the low-value work, we train others to associate us with it. The Stoic correction is to accept necessary duties with full effort while calmly declining or negotiating when the imbalance becomes habitual. We perform every task with excellence, yet we no longer position ourselves as the automatic solution for undesirable work. This sign does not define our worth. It simply shows where boundaries have been loose. By applying the dichotomy of control, we focus on delivering quality in whatever we do while protecting our long-term growth and visibility. Our value is proven through consistent virtue, not through the glamour of the assignment. Over time, this disciplined approach shifts dynamics. Those who once defaulted to us for lesser tasks begin to hesitate because they sense our quiet self-respect. New opportunities start to appear as others recognize the reliability paired with self-command. The change is gradual and never forced, but it flows naturally from inner strength. Stoicism teaches that every role, no matter how small, can be performed with greatness of soul. We bring the same integrity to mundane duties as to prominent ones, yet we refuse to let the pattern trap us indefinitely. This balance preserves our energy and dignity while still contributing fully. Ultimately, the assignment of low-value tasks becomes a daily classroom for practicing indifference to status and commitment to excellence. As we master this, our perceived value rises because we demonstrate a character that cannot be confined to any single role. Number 9. Conversations with you often end abruptly or feel one-sided. Interactions frequently wrap up quickly with polite but short endings, or the other person dominates the entire exchange while your responses receive minimal engagement. Texts go unanswered for long stretches after initial replies, and calls or meetings feel rushed toward conclusion. This creates a recurring sense that time spent with you is not equally valued. In busy modern life, these patterns can seem normal, yet their repetition signals how others prioritize the connection. Stoicism encourages us to notice this calmly as information, not as rejection of our company. The cause often traces back to moments when we have over-accommodated or failed to bring substantial presence to the interaction. When conversations become passive on our side, others naturally take the lead and wind down early. Stoic practice calls us to engage with genuine interest, thoughtful questions, and calm confidence, contributing depth rather than merely responding. We give the relationship our full attention without clinging to its length. This sign highlights where we may have placed too much weight on external connection for our sense of worth. By grounding our value in our own character and virtue, we free ourselves from needing every exchange to feel balanced or long. The abrupt endings lose their power to disappoint when our inner fulfillment is already secure. Practically, we prepare for interactions by deciding in advance to bring value through presence and insight, then release any expectation about how long the conversation lasts. This creates interactions marked by quality over quantity, and people gradually respond to the substance we offer. Stoicism reminds us that we cannot control how others value our time together, only how we show up in it. By focusing on excellence in our conduct during every exchange, we embody the kind of person whose company carries natural weight. The one-sided or short conversations become less significant as our self-command deepens. In the end, this pattern serves as training to cultivate rich inner life so that no external conversation defines our day. We move through interactions with calm dignity, knowing our worth stands independent of their duration or depth. Number 10. Your advice or input is sought only as a last resort. When problems arise, people exhaust other options before turning to you for suggestions or perspective. Your input is rarely the first choice, even in areas where you have clear experience. This appears in both personal relationships and professional settings, where others default to different voices and only circle back when those fail. The pattern is subtle yet persistent, indicating that your judgment is viewed as secondary. Stoicism sees this as useful feedback on current perception, not as proof that our counsel lacks merit. Often the habit forms when we have given advice too eagerly or without being asked, diluting its perceived value. Stoic wisdom advises speaking only when our input is truly needed and delivering it with brevity and clarity. We withhold unsolicited opinions and reserve our reasoned judgment for moments when it can have real impact. This sign teaches detachment from the need to be seen as the wise one. Our satisfaction comes from the soundness of our own thinking, not from how quickly others seek it. By cultivating deeper wisdom in private through daily Stoic reflection, we naturally become the kind of person whose counsel carries weight when it is finally requested. Practically, when asked as a last resort, we respond without resentment, offering clear, principle-based guidance and then stepping back. This consistent approach builds quiet authority over time because people associate us with calm, reliable insight rather than eager availability. Stoicism assures us that true influence flows from inner excellence, not from being the first name on everyone's list. As we focus on refining our own character and reason, the pattern of last resort status gradually shifts or loses its importance entirely. Living according to this outline transforms the experience from feeling undervalued into steady self-development. Each time advice is sought late, it becomes another opportunity to practice virtue and detachment, strengthening the very qualities that ultimately earn deeper respect.